And we're live. Thanks everybody for joining us for this new webinar today. There's a lot of people here, a lot of questions already, a lot of early birds. We're really excited here at Mix of the Masters. It's our 5th week of webinars, doing a webinar every day with a different producer. And today is a very special day because we are welcoming the incredible duo of producer. Stargate is here with us today. Hi, Tor. Hi, Mikael. Thanks for doing it. Thanks for joining us to share a little bit of your experience and answer a few questions for the next 60 minutes. How are you today?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having us.
Doing pretty good, all things considering. Thank you for having us. Excited.
So I think we already have a lot of questions for you guys. I'll let you, the floor is yours to answer a few of them.
Yeah, thanks so much for sending all these questions. It's pretty overwhelming already, but we're going to start from the top. Sarmad has a great question. I hope I'm saying your name right. You're asking, what part of production do you spend the most time on? And that is a great question because we've been doing this for 20 years and wasted a lot of time on the things that turned out not to be so important. And we've learned to kind of focus in on what's really important. And our approach is to always let the song lead the way. So what we spend the most time on is searching for something special, something that stands out in the actual composition, in the music, in the harmonics, in the, like a little bit of a chord progression or something that happens with this sound when it hits that sound. And quite often the way we do that is just me and Mikael will open up the different keyboards and we'll just sit and we'll jam and we'll play until we hit on something that we like. So once we have that, that's really the starting point. And sometimes it comes in 5 minutes and other times it doesn't come at all. So that's really what we spend the most time on. And once we're got that core idea, we try to finish it pretty quickly so it feels fresh and spontaneous. Because there's always a moment of doubt that creeps in, when you've heard it 100 times and you're not sure if it's any good. And that's when it's important to first be on the team, but also not to doubt it too much and to just, this is this idea, let's just bounce it down, and then we can judge it at a later stage. So that's really the start of all our ideas, is us playing and forcing ourselves to come up with something that make us feel something.
That leads nicely into another question I see Michael is asking. He's asking, what are the pros of working in a duo? And as you said, one of the main things, main advantages that I feel is like, of course, having someone to bounce ideas off of, but also, more importantly, not doubting your ideas, because it's so easy if you sit there alone to think, oh, is this good enough, or am I on the right track, or is this? Yeah, it's hard to judge it when you're just by yourself. So having someone there to tell you that this is amazing, let's keep working on this idea, or hey, why don't we try something else? Let's not waste time on this path. So having someone to collaborate with is, at least from my experience, really important.
And then I can take the next one. There's a couple of questions from the Sound Brothers in Switzerland. Hi guys, you're asking if there's something that you wish that we had known earlier that was holding us up. And you're also asking about mentors, if we had any mentors. I don't know. I mean, we've spent a lot of time, so we could have probably gotten to this quicker. But, the key is to find something that's identifiable. First of all, you got to find something that's good and makes you feel something. But what really, made a huge difference for us was when we went from making records in Europe and in the UK to moving to New York and starting to work with different artists that were closer to our own sensibilities. And it really helped us find our own sound and to sharpen, our own, basically our own unique style. So that took us years. Some people can find it much quicker. So I would say that if we could have fast-tracked those first few years and been a little bit more, not so concerned with sounding American or sounding like someone else, then I think that would have been great. So I would encourage everyone to, if you find something that's truly and uniquely yours and that comes easy, you should try to keep going down that road. Because, we came to New York with a whole bunch of ideas and beats. Some of it was trying to sound American because we thought that's what Americans wanted. And very quickly, once we met those A&R people, they helped us basically in saying that I don't need what I already have. I want something that I can't get from anyone else. And that was the more melodic stuff. So that leads me on to the mentoring question, where you're saying that you're asking if we've had any mentors, and absolutely. When we did, started out in the UK, I would say that our manager, Tim Blacksmith, and Danny D were huge mentors for us, because they were music producers themselves that we looked up to. We had a lot of respect for them, and they had great taste. And they basically were very honest about the stuff that we were doing, what was great, what wasn't so good. So that helped us get better. And once we started working in America, working with Jay-Z and his whole team, and Jay Brown and Tata, and once up at Def Jam, and then later on Rock Nation, it was really important to our development, because they always kept it honest. They knew what they were talking about. Sometimes even when we were doubting our own ideas, they would say like, no, this is great, this is how we should keep it. So absolutely important to surround yourself with people and to be open. I find there's another question on here, I don't know who asked it, about what's the common mistake of a beginner, and it's a combination sometimes of not being able to take on board what people are telling you. So you think you're right, but there's also the sense of it can be when you don't believe in yourself. So I would say that to basically have someone there that can help you sharpen your skills and help your music get better is very, very important. That's been essential for us.
Absolutely, I'll second that. And also the big advantage that we had with our mentors is that they're all music people, and they really know music. It's not just like a business person, and that's I guess also been key to our success. I think there's a couple of technical questions here I would like to answer as well.
Vocal chain, baby.
Halstein from Norway is asking, hey guys, what is your favorite vocal chain? And I see some other questions too, like do you use EQ, and some more like technical questions. And I will tell you that. I'll tell you exactly what we use, for example, on our vocal chain. In the box, we use a old-fashioned Focusrite EQ called D2. It's basic low cut, and we boosted a little bit around like normally like 10K. And then we have the tried and tested Renaissance compressor waves, and followed by, this is my favorite though. This is the, if I had to choose one that I couldn't get rid of, that I could keep, it would be this one. It's Pultec EQ 1A. It gives you that kind of high sizzle sound on the vocals that just makes them pop and stand out. So what you do is just you put it on 12K and you boost it to, you'll have to play around with it, but when you boost the high end on that, it just opens up the whole vocal. And then we have an Echo Boy usually, and followed by the Valhalla Vintage Verb on a setting called Dirty Plate, which is super, super nice. So that is the basic. And of course, it's also really important to have a good mic. So we have a Neumann U47 from the 50s, and we run it through some Pultec pre's and stuff. So of course, it's really important. But Tor, you also have another story when it comes to vocal chains.
Yeah,
because we've been working with this for a very long time, of course.
Yeah, and I love that question, because it's great to kind of break down and to demystify the whole process of vocals and how to make it sound great. The vocal chain is obviously important, but back in the day when we were starting out and listening to R&B records, me and Mikkel were listening to Brandy and trying to figure out how can we get that vocal sound. We worked on the EQ and the de-essers and the compression rates, and and we were just really, really wondering how they got it to sound so full and yet sparkly and everything at the same time. And then 15 years later, we were in the room with Brandy, and there it was. Just it came out of her mouth. It had the EQ and the compression was already on her voice, and it really helped us to understand. Sometimes it's not just the vocal chain; it's actually the singer and the emotion. I think it's really helpful that you broke it down, Mikkel, because sometimes people come and they ask. We had another artist the other day who was in the studio saying that's the best vocal chain I've heard. Sometimes it's actually simplifying it, right? And just having good basic elements. It's like good ingredients in a dish. Sometimes you put too much on there, and that's a mistake. Where if you have a great vocalist and a good song, less is more.
Absolutely. And of course, the most important thing is using your ears. You could use almost any compressor, any EQ, any mic, but you have to just set it so it sounds good. So that's something, of course, you have to learn your craft and learn to do that. But just using your ears and play around with what you have. It's like a button that you press and then suddenly it sounds great.
So now we have a couple more questions that I'd like to answer. There's one from Perez Ovic. Basically, no more softball questions. Now he's asking, or she is asking, are you guys too old to make young and contemporary pop music? Which I think is great. I think as long as you're inspired by what's going on around you and it feels natural, I don't think age should come into it. But, in theory, maybe we are too old. And you could say that pop music, in essence, is the sound of youth, right? They're the main consumers, and being young and rebellious and wanting to break with the previous sound is an important part of growing up. So pop music is definitely an area where mostly young people use that to identify, and every generation wants their own heroes. But I think what we can help, where we come in, is we can help their structure and help people sharpen their songwriting skills and basically help a new generation, fulfill their dreams. And we've seen that over and over, that all of a sudden there's just a new person walking through the door, and it's very exciting and very raw. And sometimes when we sit down with that person, some of our experience can be used to help that new artist, and we learn something new from that artist. We have, we're listening to obviously a lot of urban stuff because we're just always been inspired by that. And when we hear someone that has great drums, we'd love to be in the studio with that person and to see how they do it and to collaborate and see. And then a lot of times they love what we play and our understanding of song structure and to make a song, help a song go from good to great. So as long as it feels natural, we'll keep doing it. We're the same generation as Max Martin and Jay-Z, and as long as they're making music, I feel like we can make music.
Yes, I also think as long as you like what's on the charts and on the radio, then it's easier to kind of make it. But if you think everything on the radio is shit, then it's probably time to retire. There was another question here that's interesting, that they're asking how much time do you guys use on your instrumentals? And usually the best ones, they happen really, really fast. So I think all our biggest records, I think we definitely didn't spend more than one day on all of the music. Probably more like an hour or two on the initial idea, that just, when the magic happens, it usually just falls into place. So rarely do we sit like day after day and tweak and change the instrumental. But what we might do is we might do a simple, fast track that we have someone write to, and then later we will remix our own songs. So that we'll take the a cappella, and then Tor and myself will sit down and try maybe some new chords and some new sounds and new directions on the same song. And that's been really helpful to us, because you always have, so it's a great way to experiment with your own songs.
And and that's a valid point too, because someone was asking her, how do you get to those special moments, and when do you know that it's something special, and do you have any techniques to get to it? And one technique is definitely not being afraid to throw away everything you had and try something else with the same song. And sometimes you write a song, the songwriters will hear the chords and they'll write a song, but once the songwriter leaves, instead of having a discussion, we're free to play around. So that's when we sit around and maybe put some completely different chords, go half tempo on the drums, do something radically different, and something will happen that wouldn't have, that songwriter would not have written that melody on top of those chords. That's one easy way to see what else is in the song. If you have a chorus but the production is lacking, sometimes it's easier to throw away everything than to sit and chip away at the same thing that you've been listening to for days. Joel Zaya has no, actually I want to cover this first. Carl was asking, what's our daily routine? And that's basically, we have been pretty consistent in showing up at the studio pretty much every day. We used to put in a good 12, 14-hour days in New York. Now we both have families, and we want to see our kids at night. So we get in every day, and at 12 o'clock at the latest, 12, and then work 7, 8, or 9 hours. Monday through Friday. That's when we don't have particular artist sessions or we travel. And if we have artist session or travel over in London or New York, we can easily do 12-hour days, and we're pretty consistent doing it 5 or 6 days a week. Show up. I like to start with doing something new, unless there was something last night that's just incredibly exciting. I always like to use that new energy to create something new. And then as the day progresses, if there's a break, you can kind of like, okay, let's open that thing we have to finish. Mikkel is really good at pushing things over the finish line. I love to do the fun stuff, but I guess that's why it works.
Yeah, it's definitely a team effort. Joel is asking, how did Dancing with a Stranger production start? And as far as I remember, it started with, I made a beat at home, the drums, and I had a complete beat. Brought it into the studio, and then Tor heard it and really liked the vibe of it. And so we basically took the drums from that beat, and then Tor did the kind of mellow chords on top of that.
Yeah, I have it right here, actually, by chance.
Yeah.
I'm glad someone asked about this, right? I got lucky.
There we go.
I think this was the starting musical idea, right?
That sign pad from, I don't know if we used on it. You can probably see what it is.
So it's really this melody right here, and then it goes into... So I don't wanna be alone tonight, alone tonight, alone tonight. So that's how that started.
Yeah, so it's a super simple beat, and the sign pads as a sub bass, and we used the Evolution plugin for that mute guitar riff. And of course, Sam and Jimmy on an amazing top line, and Normani on the second verse. That helps.
And I think it's important to say that the songwriting was always our main focus, because when Sam and we were all, the four of us were in the room together, and And as Sam and Jimmy are over in the corner kind of throwing ideas out, the moment, they said, oh, Dancing with a Stranger, we were all like, oh, that's really special, that's really good. And they started humming the melody, so you can basically feed off of each other, which is important. And most of our songs have been written like that. When we did Diamonds with Rihanna or with Sia, when we wrote it, it's the same thing there. You play something in the room, and the moment she says, shine bright like a diamond, we instantly hear that, oh, that's really special, let's protect that and let's make sure we don't lose it. Whereas if you just send a beat to someone and then hope that magic is going to come back, I'm sure that works for someone, but that doesn't really work for us. It's really the half of the job of a producer and a songwriter is also listening, right, to what everyone else is doing, and not just to sit in the computer screen and think about the drum sounds, but also what's going on around me. Are people excited? Maybe I'm feeling the energy going out of the room. Maybe we should try something else. Maybe I need to radically switch it up. Or maybe now they moved away from the idea that was so amazing in the first place. That's also a huge part of a production, because you can easily walk away from magic if you don't keep your ears open and listen to what's going on.
Yeah, we have an old story about that. Our first #1 in America, So Sick with Neo, that almost slipped away. We started with the song, he started writing it, but then someone came into the room and said, hey guys, no, we don't need any more mid-tempos. You got to do an up-tempo record. So being new in the industry, we're like, okay, so maybe we should do that. So we did another record in the meantime. That was what they requested. But luckily we went back to the original idea that we all felt really strongly about and finished So Sick. And that was our first #1 in the US.
And then we have Vib Hansu, who wants to know, how do you make such simple things sound so complex? We're definitely not trying to make them sound complex. We're trying to make them sound simple, but we're also trying to make it sound like it's enough, that it's essential. I think that's the difference. When you feel like it's enough, and if nothing sounds good, we have a bunch of keyboards here, and we try to play stuff. I find that when I can't find the right sound, it's usually because I don't know what to play. And when you have a great melody and I know this is really special, then it sounds good with every sound. So I think the art to simplicity is to really find out what the essential part of this music is and what's the magic. How do you get to that? Sometimes me and Mikael will sit and we'll do 10 tracks of different music ideas on top of each other. They all work together in some way, but they do different things. And then we'll start muting and unmuting stuff, and quite often the exciting part is when you can unmute the chords, you can unmute all the conventional stuff that feels middle of the road, but you're still left with enough music and information that you understand what's going on and that there is a chord movement. And if you listen to a lot of current pop music, that's the way the production is. The way the music is filtered and stuff. It's only like hinting at what's going on, but there's always something special there. I think Drake is really good with that. When he picks his beats, they just sound like there's nothing there, but then you start listening to it and it's like, oh, there's actually a really beautiful chord progression under this song. It's just that it's disguised as this really cool and a hard-hitting hip-hop beat. So the way we get to that is basically by trying odd combinations of sounds.
Yes. Another slightly technical question: what is your preferable DAW in the industry? And I mean, I don't think it really matters what you use. It's all about your ideas and what you put into it. All the major DAWs are amazing, and you can do anything. We use Pro Tools from scratch, and I've done that for many, many years. A lot of people use Logic. And of course, the new generation, like hip-hop, urban producers, a lot of them use FL and Ableton. FL does have like a specific sound. There's something with it so that you can push it, you can push the gain, and you can almost like distort it without it sounding distorted. That's how they get those super hard trap drums. But again, it does not really matter. It's all about your creativity and your ideas and your song. All those programs are more than good enough.
There's a question here from Jeremy Klein that I think is really good. When working with multiple writers in a session, how do you try to make the sessions productive and positive? If you're a producer and a songwriter and you're in writing sessions, this is something you have to think about every day. So it's a very, very important and essential question. I think if there's too many people in the room, it can sometimes become a little bit hard to find each and everyone's talent. And I think it's, as a producer, it's our job to basically be able to tap into everyone and to find out what they're good at. So that's really important. I don't like to be with too many people at the same time, because sometimes the writers themselves, they have different personalities. Some people will be very forward and really good singers and will just be super confident and throwing out ideas and really taking over the room. And then you have some quiet person over in the corner of the couch who's really now withdrawing, and they don't feel like there's any room for them, or they don't want to, interfere. But that might be the most talented person. So how are you going to find that out? There's a trick that we've used for a long time, and that really helps things, and that is to let everyone have their moment. And a lot of writers today like to write on the mic and to have the space of the vocal booth. So we'll say, okay, why don't everyone have a go at the mic and see what their ideas are. That gives everyone a chance to show off their own ideas uninterrupted. Because I find it's way easier to agree on stuff when everyone has contributed, and then to hear what the best idea is. So that's a really helpful trick to basically hear what everyone is about. And I also think it's the producer's responsibility to call people out and say, hey, Jeremy, what do you think? Or is there something here? Are you hearing something here? Or do you have any ideas? Because sometimes you also don't want to, you don't want to be a jerk. You don't want to criticize other people. But I think it's just important to find out what people have inside of them and to give everyone a shot. So that's a very, very essential part of producing and being in the room.
Bradnis had a follow-up question to our vocal chain question earlier on. He was asking if we put the plugins, if we use sends or if we put them straight on the track. And since the computers now have become the actual track, so we don't really use sends at all. We just put all the plugins, copies of the plugins, right on each track, and have multiple tracks with multiple copies of the same plugins with no issues, because again, we have the processing power. There was another question too about how we worked with Coldplay. That was an amazing experience, and usually we don't do a complete album like that. We usually do like 2 or 3 songs with each artist, but we were lucky enough to work with Chris, Will, Johnny and Guy on the whole album, which is just a really, really fun and different. So usually how it was, we took out a studio and then we would be making ideas and working on some of their ideas, and they would be in another room recording and tweaking, setting up guitar sounds and drum sounds, and so we would bounce back and forth and go back and forth between the studios, and we would take their ideas and refine them and give it back to them, and then they would add something, and so that was very, very fluent. Some ideas were started from scratch in the studio when we were writing together with Chris and the guys in the room, or Chris would be would present it to us. Like he would have a song idea on the piano, he would sit there and present it, and usually they would be really, really good. So that was a very different process than we usually do, and also it took a lot longer. It's not like one song a day, knock it out, and on to the next one. We really had to kind of come back the next day, listen to it, maybe try something else, add another guitar. So it was, in a way, maybe a more kind of traditional approach to the producer role than we usually had.
There's a fun question up here that Emmanuel C has. It's, are you familiar with Max Martin's melodic math? And if so, can you elaborate on it? So I would say that I am not familiar with his, if there's a melodic math. And I guess that's why he has 23 number ones and we only have 10. But I would say that there's a few things that we've learned from Max. First, it's great to be from Scandinavia. Which really helped us in the beginning to really believe that, hey, if he's doing it, maybe we can do it. That was the first one, to basically break down those walls of breaking into America and showing that, you can be from Scandinavia and make good pop music. So we owe him a great deal just for opening those doors. And, people that couldn't get Max, they called us. And that was really a great opportunity for us to walk through that door. And when it comes to his songwriting, I think the main reason some of the main takeaways are basically to write what some people would call active choruses. Maybe this goes under the melodic math, but basically, you want your chorus to be the catchiest and busiest and most fun part to listen to. He's been very, very good at writing those straight melodies and keeping it in a way simple, at least on paper. But he also always has some magic moments of there's a little bit of a chord change at some point, or there's a lift, or there's a surprising note, or there's a goosebump moment. And of course, we look for the same things. I wouldn't say that we look for them in the same way that he does, because no one can touch him on what he does. He's the best in the world. But we're also looking, he's never been afraid of having something that sounds a little bit sad. He's never been afraid to have, loneliness. He used that a lot in his beginning, the early songs. And it always had like a melancholy to it, which I think separated it from or still separates it from a lot of pop music, which is something we try to do too. We do most of our stuff in a minor key, even though if we started in a major, it's usually in a minor key. And we try to infuse that emotion too. So there's a lot to be learned from that structure. I guess we sometimes, I'm sure our biggest songs probably follow the math. It's just that we don't know what we're doing. We're just searching until it feels good.
Yeah, that leads me greatly on to the next question. A couple of people are asking, how much theory do you know, and have you had education in music? And none of us have really had any real education. I've had private teachers since I was very, very little, started as like 8 years old. And learned basic how to read chords, but no real kind of music education. I actually applied for a music school for high school, but I didn't get in. So that was a no-go. So I had to learn it myself. And so we don't really know a lot of like theory, but I do think it's really good to know theory as long as it doesn't limit you, as long as you don't create boundaries or rules that will limit you from trying things that aren't necessarily the right thing to do. So I think it's good to have a combination of both, but not necessary to have gone or to be classically trained to make a hit record.
There's some other questions all over the map, and it's really, really exciting to see what you guys. I wish we could answer everything. So thank you so much for all your insightful questions. There's one that's very different in here, which is, where it says, take us back to a young Tor Mikkel and, where we were when we started. Now the message was retracted, but I like the question from Cargiso. And because I think it's interesting to know how we met, and the fact that we both loved music. We were on the same wavelength and we didn't even know each other, and we basically met through our mutual love of American pop music and R&B and hip hop. We had a mutual friend that said, "You guys are the only two guys in Norway that I know that love and are trying to make R&B and hip hop. You should meet each other." And so he set up a meeting where Mikkel played some of his ideas, and I loved the production. And I said, "Hey, I have an artist. You want to start working together?" And the fact that we immediately understood each other and liked the same stuff has been really helpful throughout the years. I've seen other people collaborate, and we've collaborated with hundreds of people, and sometimes people spend a lot of time discussing ideas, arguing over things, whereas we never really do that. We spend a lot of time trying things. And that is a fundamental difference. Instead of saying, "Oh, but I love this bass line. It's my favorite part of the whole song. Without that bass line, I can't live." So we'll probably say, "Okay, let's try something else. Let's see where it takes us." And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been able to, work together for so long, is that fundamentally from the start, we loved the same stuff, slightly different sensibilities. Maybe Mikkel is even more musical and loved R&B more, and I came from a more stripped back hip hop background. But when we started putting those two things together, it really worked.
Absolutely. Let me see. There's so many great questions. Really appreciate it, guys. Is less always more in production? That's pretty interesting, because most of our songs and productions are pretty minimal, or not all of them, but that's usually what we gravitate to. And I do believe in the principle of when you've taken away everything that you can and you're left with the essence, that's usually a good thing. So yes, I would say less is more. But at other times too, you want it to sound like grand and epic, and like take a record like Katy Perry Firework that we did with Sandy V, for example. That's definitely not less is more. That's more is more. So certain times you want it to be over the top and want it to be a firework, and so it's both. But I think it's about finding kind of the essence of the song and the core melodic ideas, and keeping what's important, and not have 5 things doing the same thing.
Yeah. I have a specific question here from Mr. Who's asking, how did the song Black and Yellow, the Wiz Khalifa song, come together? And I mean, it was a special moment for us, because it was really our first rap record that was legitimately ours, and then that came out, and it went all the way to #1, and it was this big cultural moment, which was really fun to be a part of. And the reason why I want to touch on that is because it was inspired by a bunch of 80s synth records. I don't want to say which ones, because in this day and age you can get sued just from being inspired by stuff. But it has this arpeggiated theme that was kind of normal in the 80s. And the idea was to basically see what we took, if we took some one of those style of themes and put a half tempo trap sounding beat underneath, what would happen. So when we made the beat, we didn't make that beat for Wiz Khalifa. We just made it and put it in the folder and let it sit there. And when we saw we were in with Wiz, we started playing him that. It was the second song we did, and he immediately loved it and came up with that Black and Yellow, because he heard what we were playing, the fast melody, and he came up with Black and Yellow. So at the time when he put it down, we thought he was just talking about his car, which was black and yellow, and I guess his watch was black and yellow. But once they put it out, we understood it was about Pittsburgh, and it was about where he was from. And this was the time when Pittsburgh went to the Super Bowl, and they played the song in the stadium, and it just became this whole movement. And it was really amazing to be part of that, because we had no idea that's what it meant to people. And it's kind of stood the test of time, and we still hear it around, and it's a fun moment.
A lot of great questions still. This is a funny one. Asking, what is your favorite BPM? Actually, we do have a favorite BPM. Like what we naturally gravitate to is probably around like 85 to 100, like that mid-tempo R&B vibes. But of course, any BPM can work. So it's not like you should limit yourself to, oh, we got to make it within these boundaries. And also the question above from Nosales is does song key matter? And that definitely matters. So a lot of times when we have artists and writers in the studio, we'll sit down and make the songs, many times just from scratch on the piano too. And then almost every time we will try the song in different keys, and because that depends on the top line, right? If the chorus is kind of feels like it's a little bit too high or the verses are too low or whatever, we got to find that sweet spot so the vocalist can really shine, and that you can, yeah, so experiment and try different keys is definitely a good thing to do.
So, Mikael, Peter von Arbin is asking if he can get a tour of the studio. So I thought that maybe there's someone else that would like to see what we work on every day. So I can basically flip the camera and I can show them, and then you can talk. You can explain what it is that we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
Do we do that?
For sure.
So let's see if I can turn this camera around. I will go in here and I'll start in here.
Yes. That's probably our favorite piece that you're looking at there. That's early 1900s Steinway baby grand that we're actually borrowing from Chris Martin.
Indefinitely.
Indefinitely, hopefully. Because we asked him when we were getting an instrument for the studio, we said, what's the best baby grand we can get that has soul and has the feel that we want, and he said, oh, you can have mine. I moved out of my house, and you can have that one, and it's a really, really special instrument, and we use it every day. And that is the mic that I talked about, the 50s Neumann U47. It needs a little bit of love, but it has this really warm, round sound that is hard to replicate with the newer mics. And then Thor's drum set, you can maybe explain about what that is.
It's a Gretsch early 50s Gretsch set that we use for fun. Then we move it in here. Here's my pride and joy, the Rhodes, Fender Rhodes 73. You see, this is just really a beautiful sounding thing that we've got plugged in directly, and we can mic it up if we want to.
And on top of that is a Korg, the micro Korg that is only used to feed a sine wave, a square sawtooth wave, into the talk box that you see there on the right, and that's what we use it for. Just the talkbox riffs, and we use the talkbox sometimes to create vocal effects too. You record melodies and riffs, and then you filter it and put reverb on it, almost like vocal chops, but you use the talkbox sound instead. And then we have the Prophet 12, underneath the Mellotron, Prophet X. We love those Dave Smith synths because they have that analog sound, but they're a little more stable than the old stuff. You got some UAD compressors and boring stuff like patch bass and stuff. That's the Tube Tech compressor that I talked about earlier. We used that on the vocal chain. These are the barefoot monitors that we've learned to love. It was actually also a tip from the Coldplay guys. They use them everywhere, and now we bring them everywhere. And of course, the industry standard Yamaha NS10s. And what else we got? This
is my pride now. This is my favorite one.
The Moog 1, the brand new polyphonic Moog. it sounds so fat and rich that sometimes it's too big sounding, but it just has this amazing texture and also user friendly because it has all the buttons. And this is a special piece. It's a special anniversary mini Moog. They only made 30 of them, and our name is engraved in the plaque. It's actually 24 karat gold plated, the whole thing. And so it just sounds better when it looks that good.
You can't see anything when it's dark, though. You have no idea what your knob you're turning, which is helpful too.
That's true. And the Juno 60, the vintage Roland keyboard. Underneath there, we have another Dave Smith Oberheim.
Yeah.
And the bigger version of the Mellotron underneath. We have both versions of that.
This is the best one. It's amazing. All right.
And some guitars, and that's basically it. And of course we have the actual MacBook. No, not the MacBook, but the trash can Mac with servers and all the good stuff in the box.
Yep. There was a question that I thought was really interesting from Ash, who asked, how do you deal with bad vibes in the studio, if there is any bad vibes? And you know, at the end of the day, we are dealing with people. As much as this stuff is really important and fun and inspiring to have, it's really how you deal with the session when people walk in the room and working with artists. You know, we've worked with, so it's a very different experience working with Coldplay, who's, you know, 4 guys in their late 30s, and working with a young female artist that's 15 years old and just starting out. You know, it's completely different temperaments and personalities and needs and wants. So I think it's very important to be adaptable and to really pick up on what's going on in the room. We haven't experienced many bad vibes in the room. I think most people are on their best behavior and are professional and want to make something happen. I find that when people walk in the room to work with us, they want, you know, to put the best foot forward and to make something great. That's why they're here. And if there's any bad vibes, we don't really feel it. Sometimes, you know, we had people not come back, you know, that basically say, or we've even had sessions where we felt like after a few days we're wasting our time, and we could maybe address that we don't want to go in the same direction. But it's, you know, very rarely do we get people that don't want to be here. That's very rarely do we invite people in that we don't want to be with. So we try to make the best of it. And we have no pride or ego invested in our ideas. We never try to convince people to do a beat. You know, this is probably something that a lot of producers out there, especially if they're like the beat making type experience, you know, you have this beat that you think is the best beat in the history, but then the top liners or the artists, they don't respond to it. They pick something else. We never try to nudge someone towards a beat, because it has to come from the heart and it has to be inspiring. So if someone picks something else, if they sit with it for 3 hours and they ask us, hey, can we change it to something else? We have no emotions or ego attached to ideas. They're just ideas, and we find that everything is better when everyone's inspired. So that's our main objective, is to keep things moving in the right direction. So thanks for that question.
Emmanuel is asking if we have any mixing advice, and we usually send our records out for mix, but usually what we send is very, very close to what the finished mix will sound like. So I would say like the production and the mixing goes hand in hand, and we're kind of working on the mix while we're producing it. So it just comes natural when you're creating. While you're working, you use compression and EQs, and I think it's probably cliche, but like space is the key, like Tor talked about earlier with Drake, like to create space for the vocal, to filter sound so that you so that certain elements can shine, and of course don't have two sub basses compete in the same frequencies and basic things like that. But again, like positioning things so each element has their own place and can and don't compete, I would say, are main things.
And then there's a question from Samantha Winter. She wants to know if playing an instrument is an important part of being a producer. That's a great question too, because there are many different kinds of producers. You have what I call an old school kind of producer, which is basically the guy that sits in the back of the room in the sofa and has an opinion on what's going on, and they're typically more of a band producer. I would say you're that kind of producer. You don't have to know how to play at all. Sometimes it could maybe even be helpful not to know how to play, because you're not trying to be the musician or the band. You're listening instead of thinking of what to play. So then it's definitely not important. I think if you're a beat maker and you want to create your own music from scratch, it's helpful to know basic, some basic playing and have an understanding of song structure and harmonics and chords. But also, again, it's not necessary. I mean, we've heard, amazing beats and music made by people who don't really know what they're doing, but they know how to get what they want. So then you can just sit and basically move things up and down in FL Audio, or you can, basically just grab samples and put it together and make it sound great. So I would say no, it's not necessary to know how to play an instrument, but it helps.
Baldwin is asking, when you get feedback from someone else, how do you decide whether to follow it or not? And of course, it depends on who's coming with the feedback. If it's the artist or writer or the A&R. So I guess we tend to listen to people we trust. So that if it's a specific creator or A&R even that has a request, then usually we will try it. But other times too, we have to stand our ground if we really believe in something creatively, or if we made a choice creatively. Then we will stand by it and say, no, this is our intention, and so we're going to keep it like that. And again, also like with artists, it can be tricky if the artist comes with something that we really don't think is the way to go. So then you have to kind of balance it and figure out, should we try to go that direction or not? But again, if the artist has a really good sense of themselves and we trust their opinion, then again, we can just try it, and we can always go back to what we had if it doesn't work.
And now we have a question from Leighton, I think it is. Should you try to mix demos as good as you can, or can raw ideas work? And any advice how to network from the middle of nowhere? Well, first of all, let me say that me and Mikkel, we're from the middle of nowhere. I'm from Askim in Norway, not exactly the cradle of pop music or urban music, and Mikkel is from Trondheim. So we started out just loving music, and I would say that it's easier than ever to get your music out there. I mean, it's also easier to drown, but it's definitely easier. I had a question from an artist in the studio who said, how did you guys get your music out there before the social media and before the internet? She could not fathom how we got people to hear our music when there was no internet. And, I think the main focus always just has to be when my stuff is good enough, people will discover it. And we've always had that attitude of, if we're not getting the cuts we want or working with the artist we really want or the results we think we deserve, we just go back to the lab and we think, how can we create that reality that we want? Okay, it needs to be better. What would someone do that's twice as good? So to always stay focused on doing the work and believing in the ideas and thinking that all those other things and results will follow, that's how you get it. It's not about networking. It's about doing great music and making sure your stuff is better and better. And of course, you got to send it out to people and making sure that you're visible. But I think that once it's great, people will discover you. When it comes to the question of Do you mix it as good as you can? Then yes. We never think, oh, I'm making a demo. We always think we're making records. But that doesn't mean that we're going to sit around and fiddle over the kick drum for 5 hours. We'll spend 5 minutes on it, but we'll pick something that we feel is good enough that it could go all the way. Of course, we know at some point that this is not the finished product. We're not going to send this to Spotify tomorrow, but we definitely want it to sound good enough for someone to hear and be like, oh, I can hear this being on the radio, and so we get there pretty quickly. If it sounds crappy, yeah, you should spend a little bit of time on it. But definitely when the idea is there, don't spend 5 days mixing it.
Ivy is asking, which vocalist have you worked with that really blew you away? And we've been fortunate to work with a lot of vocalists that has blown us away. Some of the best in the world. The latest one is, I would say, Sam Smith. There's not that many artists that can sing a song top to bottom, one take, and it sounds amazing. That's something that's very, very rare these days. And usually you have to do like 10 takes or 20 takes and comp it and time it. But with Sam, I think most of the records, we rarely do more than 3 takes and then maybe use 2 of them. So here, I would say he's definitely one of the best in the world. We've been fortunate to work with Beyonce. No one is better at anything than her. So she's absolutely top of the list, and she also actually comps her own vocals. She'll know exactly what she did on each take, and she'll say, "Oh, can you use the second take on that line?" And she just knows exactly details of her performance. And of course, Rihanna as well is an amazing vocalist. She wasn't maybe that technically amazing in the very beginning when she was 16 and we started working with her, but she had always had like that character and more than vocal skills and runs. That's what, of course, we're looking for, is the character and something different and unique about the voice.
So we're coming up to an hour, but I've got one last question I think we can do. It's just Camilo Carlson Ramirez, who's asking, what do you think usually distinguishes a song from sounding amateur versus professional? And today there is no distinction. That's the beauty of it. There's so much stuff that's on the chart and that's exciting, that's really truly made on someone's laptop in a bedroom. When we started out, there was this huge, you had to get over the stumbling block of being in the studio to make something sound great. You had to have really good equipment, and maybe you even had to have a record deal and someone with a budget supporting you for your records to sound great. That's completely disappeared. All the big records, or a lot of the big records today, are made on equipment that's accessible and easily accessible to everyone. That makes it really fun for someone that's starting out. So I would say that there is no on the technical side, there is no distinction between amateur and professional. If you can make it and you can finish it and you can upload it to Spotify, you are a professional. I think what beginner mistakes would be maybe to try too much. You're not clear in what your idea is. You need to sharpen, your hook. You need to kind of fix the sound. I think that's really the difference between an amateur and a professional, is more in the mindset, what they're willing to do to get better. And if I can come with a suggestion for a book to read, which is more about mindset than it is about music production, but Steven Pressfield has written a book called Turning Pro. It's a book that I go to all the time. It changed my life. I read it, when I was absolutely, 10 years into my career, but it's really helpful for me to look at how you can remove distractions from your life and focus on the things that really give results and what you should be focusing on, instead of getting rid of all the noise, focusing. And I find that a lot of successful people, they follow the same rule of doing the work and not worrying about what other people think until later. So Stephen Pressfield turning pro, and he goes into depth between, talking about the differences between the amateur and the pro. So good luck.
That was a great way to end it. Thank you so much, guys, for all the amazing questions, and let's do it again soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mikael. Thanks, Tor. It's been amazing. Very excited, and a lot of questions answered. So we hope to have you soon back and do more with you guys as part of Mix with the Masters. And thanks for everybody for your questions. Please stay safe, stay home, and be responsible, and do great music. Thank you so much, Tor and Mikael. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Our pleasure. Thank you.